The Battle of Tewkesbury has been reenacted for the first time since the COVID pandemic, and I was there, and I'm going to tell you how I got on in this video, which has been sponsored by Audible, but we'll get to that in good time. Now, as those of you who have seen my previous two videos in this series will be well aware, I was invited, and this acted as a spur to get me to get my armour to a wearable state. It was quite a hectic last week trying to make things. Did I finish it? No. I had, as I left my house, two enormous bags with stuff that I was pulling on wheels, and a great big rucksack which had in it, as well as more medievally stuff, it also had my tent, and a shoulder bag of things to work on in the train on the way down. Yes, it was going to be a near thing whether I was going to get this all ready in time. And arriving at the other end, turns out that the railway station for Tewkesbury is really quite a long way away from Tewkesbury, so that was another taxi ride. So I arrived towing my stuff on a blistering hot day, and I'd got almost everything done. One of the things I worked on the train on the way down was adding some padding to this, my arming doublet. So what I did is I had put it on, and I had drawn around my collarbones with pencil, and then seen what sort of shape I'd got, cut a piece of paper to match that, then cut out bits of sheepskin, which then in the train on the way down I sewed in as padding. So I would have some padding on my collarbones because they were suffering, as those of you who've seen the previous videos will know, from my breastplate resting on them. And it seemed to work. I can attest that with this padding and the standard, that is the male collar, over the top, my collarbones were fine. Another thing I needed was more points, more of these laces, like these ones. And I thought, it's okay. I've contacted the lady, Lucy the Tudor, who makes these. They're great, but unfortunately some of the heads were coming off, and she said, oh, that maybe they're the wrong size. I went along thinking, well, I'll get another packet. I'll get another whole packet, so I'll have 3 lots of them, so it'll be fine. I'll have a new lot that'll be strong, and perhaps with narrower heads. And she saw the state of my tunic. She saw how narrow the grommeted holes were, and she said, "Oh no, they're too narrow. No, you'll just get annoyed. You'll be pulling on the aglets. They're not designed for that, and you'll be pulling them off, and you'll get annoyed, and then things will wear out because it'll be dragging through the holes every time, and you'll get dissatisfied, and I'll get complaints, and I'm not having it. So no." And she took the points that I had off me and refused to sell me any new ones. So not only did I not have more points, I now had no points. Fortunately, I had bought a bumper packet of cheap modern shoelaces. Definitely that was a good idea. But I wanted proper points. So I then found a stall that was selling really nice tools. Oh, old-fashioned tools are really nice. And amongst them was this. It's actually for basketry, but I thought that is the perfect tool for forcing into the grommet hole of a doublet and forcing the holes bigger, and then I can re-sew the grommet holes, and it'll be a bigger hole, and maybe then she'll sell me some. And so I went back to her and showed her the Mark II holes, and she relented, and she did sell me one lot. She said, oh, whilst I was working with them, some of the heads came off in my hand too, and I realised, oh, I've put the wrong rivets in. Arming doublet. Did this work? Yes, it did its job. It fits me actually quite satisfactorily. Didn't get horribly worn collarbones, and you can see that it ends up really manky. It ends up very, very filthy, but I knew it would. And you can see that the dye has run from some things, the points or the leathers on the armour. Yes, you get very sweaty, but actually it doesn't smell anything like as rank as I was expecting. One of these days I'll have to wash it, and I hope it doesn't shrink too much. So, arming doublet, overall success. Oh. Now you may be disappointed to be looking at a picture of a man behind a desk. Where are the exciting images of battle, you may be saying? I want to see these thousands of reenactors. Well, because I was in the battle, I was in a very bad position to be recording the battle. They had strict and I think understandable rules against people wandering around with rather unmedieval camcorders. So I'm reliant on people in the audience to have taken footage, and I found some and got permission to use it. So you will see the occasional clip, such as this one, for instance.
So the saying goes, from the top of Tewkesbury Abbey. So she had a grandstand position of the way all of this planned out, all across the fields and rines and ditches and drains of Tewkesbury.
Starting with the armour now, let's go from the ground up. So that's sabatons and greaves. So greaves, they go on the lower leg. Really got very little to say about these, other than that they worked absolutely fine. The awkwardness of putting on a greave is that this edge here tends to close on your hose that you're wearing on your legs, and that can be quite annoying. But once you've once I'd got them closed and not pinching on my hose and had got the buckles done up, they just sat quite happily hanging on the calf muscle for the rest of the time that I had these on. I would say that these are not encumbering, they're not noisy, they work absolutely fine, just not a problem. So greaves, hooray for greaves. Now the greave goes above the sabaton, and it has to work with the sabatons. Now the sabatons, these are the sabatons, these are, if you want to be stealthy, don't wear sabatons. These are noisy. If you want to run quickly, don't wear sabatons. These are heavy, flappy bits of metal on the end of your legs, just where you don't want a heavy, floppy thing to be if you're trying to run fast. But whereas my armourer said, oh, you won't want to fight in them, you know what? I fought in them and they were absolutely fine. I never was required to run at anything resembling a sprint. And yes, it's true that your grip, because of these metal bars, also because of the authentic medieval boots I was wearing underneath, your grip isn't great on the ground, but the ground was a flat field. Yes, there were some stones in it, but they're only little stones. It was a flat field, and in the main it wasn't covered in writhing wounded bodies or dropped incredibly sharp bill hooks and the like, or arrows sticking in the ground, because they were careful not to have hazards like that. So it was just a plain field that was actually quite easy to traverse, and in these I had really not that much trouble. Yes, they are heavy, and I would leave them off if I ever really needed to move quickly. On the second day, we've reenacted the battle twice, once on the Saturday and once on the Sunday. On the second day, one of these spring clips came undone, and the back of one sabaton was flapping around rather annoyingly, and it's very difficult to get it back on yourself. There's a lot of unpleasant bending to get down to the sabaton, and the clip's quite difficult to work, and if you've got gauntlets on, it's not easy. That only happened once, and despite the fact that the back was flapping around, the front fitted onto my boot so well that actually it never came off, so it really wasn't that big a problem. One thing I was curious about was whether the greave would stay inside would stay outside the sabaton the whole time. Would it be outside the sabaton like that, or would it sometimes go inside the sabaton like that? Well, I can report that sometimes it went inside and sometimes it was outside, and it didn't seem to matter. I was able to move around and fight whether it was inside or outside. I suppose outside would be better. It would look neater for a start, and would guide a descending blow outside my foot and into the ground. But yeah, quite often it ended up inside, and it didn't seem to matter, so I was able to carry on and fight. So there you go. Sabatons. Overall, pretty good. Don't wear them if you need to sprint, and yeah, the spring clips could be better. Now, there's quite a bit of corrosion on these sabatons, particularly in the bottom half an inch or so that was next to the ground. I suppose I was crushing grass and maybe tiny bits of sap were getting there. I don't know. It was an extremely hot and dry day. The ground wasn't at all wet, but it did have grass on it. So these got more corroded than most things, and they're going to be quite a bit of work to clean. I've got various polishes, and I've also got a felt dome on the end of this thing, which is, I don't know how well this works, to be honest, but I've been trying to de-rust things and then oil things, and that's going reasonably well. In the main, I've been using the familiar brand of 3-in-1 oil, but someone, one of my viewers from motorbikes.cc, they sent me some products including cutting edge sword oil and cutting edge leather care and some polish as well. They sent me them free, but they didn't pay me anything to endorse them. But can I endorse them? Well, I'm not entirely sure that I can. I mean, I've now used them, having got back, and I've been putting them on, putting the oil on the leather and on the metal and so forth. And I can report that the leather did not immediately burst into flames, or the metal be eaten away as if by the strongest of acids. But how can one really assess quickly the effectiveness of an oil? It seems to be fine. One of its strange to me selling points is that it is vegan. And I find it a little bit odd. Certainly hitherto I can never report that too much meat in my 3-in-1 has ever been a problem, but if it is for you, then these oils are apparently vegan. Right, so that's the sabatons and the greaves out the way. So what next? Cuisses. Oh, the cuisses are over there. Hang on. Here you go. So we've got a cuisse here, which is attached to an articulated pulleen, the knee cop, the knee defence, and this overlaps with the top of the greave. They've got buckles down the inside here, and a little bit of articulation, but not a huge amount. I can say that these are very nicely made. They've always fitted me pretty well. In fact, my armourist said that they were perhaps the best legs he'd ever made. I've never had any trouble with the legs. The only thing I can report is that lacing these up to the bottom of the doublet using the points, it's not immediately obvious the best way to do it, and I didn't do it exactly the same way both days. And the top of the cuisse, particularly here, did obviously rub against the hose quite a bit. Well, I mean, of course it would, wouldn't it? But that was a problem in that the hose just wore through. Can you see? Can you see? Oh, there you go. I can put a hole. There's my finger. So there's the top of the hose, and the top of the inside of the thigh, just either side of the groin, just wore straight through, just in one day's usage. Partly that's, I think, a lacing problem. I think I could lace them in a particular way so that would happen less, but it's still going to happen. So what I think I will probably do is sew in a reinforcing patch on these hose to be worn under the armour. And above the leg armour, of course, you'll need to wear a skirt. Now, with a skirt, what you want is for it to hang from your anatomical waist. So where you're narrowest here, and so as you widen out towards the hip, you want to be hanging off this here, so that's where the weight is distributed, so that it's not hanging off your shoulders or your hips, it's hanging off that bit of you. And to this end, I was making this extremely wide belt girdly thing, and I didn't finish it. This is as far as I got. So I've got 6 holes at that end of it, and there will be 6 holes somewhere around this, and you can see I've managed to get it to curve a little bit, so this will go around me like that, and because it's narrower at the top than at the bottom, that should hang on my anatomical waist, and then I will sew to the bottom in time the skirt. But I hadn't done that because it's not finished. It's going to take quite a while to finish it, and so what I did instead was I got into the skirt, pulled the skirt up. This was somebody else's idea, actually. It was a very good one, and I pulled it up much further than it would need to go, and then I put a belt around myself and did the buckle up, and then I folded the top of the skirt over the belt and then settled everything down, and then with a few of these laces laced it into place so it wasn't going anywhere, and that hung. Fortunately, my skirt is very long, much longer than it needed to be, and so I had the extra length necessary to do that, and it worked fine. Yep, it didn't fall down, and I was worried also about the thicknesses of mail underneath the fold. That's this bit of the bottom of the breast. I thought that the thicknesses of mail would add considerably to all the stuff that's around here, because there are all manner of belts and laces and the top of the cuisses, and there's a lot happening round here. And I thought that one thickness of mail might be a problem, and two thicknesses of mail plus a stout leather belt might be a big problem. But no, it wasn't. Although I can report that part of me was very sweaty. That didn't surprise me at all, though. So when I took my armour off at the end of the day, there was a big circle of sweat here on my arming doublet. But where else did I get very sweaty? I imagine that very few of you have been thinking about that, but you're now perhaps trying not to think about it. Well, tough. The other place that I got sweaty, see, sweaty around the belly, I was expecting that. You might think, oh, well, armpits, right? Yeah. Neck? Yeah. Back? Not really, no. The weird one was, from the elbow down, my forearms were absolutely sodden. My brother, when he was helping me out of my armour on the second day, he described that the level of sweat on my forearms as ugh, which I think was pretty accurate, actually, quite fair. Can I explain that one? No, not really. Possibly that sweat had started somewhere else and then trickled down, and that was where it accumulated, presumably. But there you go, very, very sweaty forearms. So above the cuisses and the skirt, we have the back and breast, the fold. Sorry, there's the fold. So there's the placard and there's the breastplate. Now then, how did this operate? Not bad, but it is very, very stiff. And there did come a point when I had to fall over. Now, falling over was something I knew that I was likely to have to do at some point, by choice or otherwise, but it's something I'd never actually done. I mean, if you've got a bright new shiny suit of armour, are you just going to go just fall over in it just to test it? No, well, you wouldn't, would you? Well, I hadn't. But I did know that when I died in the battle, I was going to have to, fall over. And, well, imagine rugby. Okay, so there you are. You're standing in a field, perfectly flat plain. It's on a rugby pitch, and someone says, "Right, I want you to run over there and then dive onto the ground as hard as you can." You're probably not going to do it. It's very difficult to bring yourself to do it. And if somehow you did bring yourself to do it, you're probably, ow, when you hit the ground. And yet, when you're actually playing rugby and there's an actual person running along, and if you don't stop him, he'll score a try. And so you are running as fast as you possibly can, and you dive headlong onto the ground, crunch. That is what you do, but you think nothing of it. And most of the time, you don't notice the pain at all. Well, similarly, in a fight, when it comes time to die, I just sort of, okay, I'll die now. And I just threw myself onto the ground, and it didn't hurt at all, and didn't hurt the armour at all.
Bodyguard goes forth.
And here's me just about to die.
With bodyguards, and over comes the bow.
And I'm dead.
Is a champion soldier.
Well, I've often wondered about whether armour is good or bad in a fall. So if two men fall 20 feet onto some reasonably hard ground, flat ground, is the one wearing armour going to be hurt more or less than the other one? What if it's flexible armour like mail? Or what if it's stiff armour like plate? A stiff piece of armour might push into you. You might land on an edge of a piece of armour and it might jab into you. And that could hurt you a lot more than if you hadn't been wearing it. But then if you landed on jagged rocks, then the stiff plates would protect you from the jaggedness of the rocks. But whatever armour you're wearing makes you an awful lot heavier. So you're going to hit with an awful lot more of a thump. And the armour that's on top of you is going to hit you from above, and it's not immediately obvious actually whether armour would help in a fall or not. Anyway, I fell over, I was all right, and I lay on the ground quite realistically, and someone said, "You're being very method there." He was quite impressed. You can get up now.
Per volley than the Lancastrians are.
The reason that I talked about all this falling over stuff is that this is very, very stiff. There's no articulation between this part and this part. So you can't do a sit-up in it. Your body, the middle of your torso just doesn't flex at all. So as I lay on my back and someone said, okay, you can get up now, I tried to get up in the normal way that a person gets up. You sort of sit up, don't you? Only with a completely stiff torso from neck right down to waist. Nothing happened. I tried to do a sit up and you can't. So you have to roll onto your side and push yourself up. I mean, you know, with the right technique, getting up's not actually that difficult, but I just had never had to get up from that position in armour before, at least not in this sort of armour. And at first, nothing's happening, I can't move. And then I got up. Breastplate. Now I've talked about this dent, which I received at length in another video, so I'm not going to repeat that, but if you watch the previous videos, you'll find out how I got the dent. The fold articulates fine. Tassets. Yes, problem there.
Edward is marching forward with his powerful, stocky, tall figure to the fore, with the dual figures of the Queen in her long white veil and her son in his surcoat.
A tasset hangs from the fold like this by its straps, and even as I knock it like this, you can hear that because it's got leather on the back, it's not actually very noisy, which is quite nice. However, with mine at least, there is nothing holding this part of the strap down. It just goes through once through the buckle, and so it's presumably what happened is that this got knocked up somehow, so that the tine was able to, so that happened. So just from a strap getting knocked upwards by something that happened during a fight, that it came undone like that. So they're not brilliantly secure. Maybe there's something that can be done for that, but I'm not entirely sure what yet.
He gave him a chance to save his life by submitting.
Pauldrons. Here we have a pauldron, and isn't it a beauty? May I draw your attention to this bit round the back with the feathery, fish finny protuberances here, which are ever so gothic and lovely. And they go around the back like that, and they do, yes, as I knew they would, get caught in the armhole of the backplate. So I would raise my arm, drop it, and it would, one of those little protuberances would get caught in the armhole, and it didn't seem to matter all that much. In fact, a lot of the time I wasn't even aware of it. It kept happening that someone came up behind me and said, oh, you just caught, hang on, I can just pull it, and they would pull it out, and I would think, oh yeah, that was a bit more comfortable and a bit more flexible. But actually, though they kept getting caught over and over again, I was able to carry on fighting. So a minor irritation, but no huge problem there. Getting them on in the first place, though, was tricky. It would be very difficult to get these in position and wear the male standard, the male collar that goes underneath it. I was wearing mine underneath, on my own. So with a squire, it was possible for the squire to flip the standard up, find a couple of grommet holes in the doublet, put the points through this, onto that, lace it up nice and close to the neck, and then somehow get the standard underneath. But it was very difficult and fiddly, and definitely needed a bit of help. So pauldrons, overall, fine.
The battle will swing to and fro today, so don't feel cheated if the action's going to be on the front, on the right side for a while.
The standard, or male collar. It was comfy enough, it went on easily, it didn't make a lot of noise because it was underneath the rest of the armour, so it wasn't rattling around all the time. And so, yes, overall, do you know what? It's fine. But I do have a very, very long neck. I mean, virtually a giraffe, really. And when I'd been wearing this for a while, it would tend to settle a bit, and you could quite definitely see a gap between the top of my standard from certain angles and the bottom of my helmet. So I think I am going to have to extend this further. I've put in one gleaming golden Latin row of brass links, and normally that goes at the edge, but I'm not going to take that off. So instead I'm going to put in a few more rows of the black steel ones, and then another row of the Latin ones, and so I'm going to have 2 rows of Latin links, and it'll look ever so nice, probably. And of course, yes, I'll have to re-sew in the liner, but I think it's worth getting this right. It's just a little bit too short for me.
Yes.
Right there. The rest of the army advanced with a steadier pace.
King Edward is right there.
On the arms at the top is the rear brace, or upper cannon of van brace, and that laces to the doublet through these two holes here, and that wasn't too much of a problem. And then that goes into a cutter, which you'll see has 4 holes on it there for the laces, and then into the cutter goes the van brace, the lower cannon of van brace, these things. And there are quite a few ways of lacing the whole thing together. And we found that actually using quite a small number of laces, so that you laced through the bottom of the rear brace and then through the top of the van brace and then through the cutter all in one go, seemed to work fine. With certain caveats. One thing I can report is that the leathers, particularly on the lower cannon of van brace, because of the sweatiness, which you may remember I mentioned earlier, these took a hell of a beating, and this poor leather at the bottom end of things needed an awful lot of oil care and attention, and I'll be giving it far more. I've bought some more dyes for getting the colour match better, and more oils and things to protect it, because it definitely needs it. Now then, there was a bit of a problem. At the end of the day, I had 2 quite significant bruises on me, and one was here, because there is a gap, you see, that between the pauldron and the armhole here, there is a gap, and someone clearly got me there with quite a hard thrust. I never noticed it. Wasn't tremendously painful, because presumably I would have noticed it. But as I was taking my shirt off at the end of the day, oh, there's a big bruise there. Huh. Don't remember getting that. But someone clearly had hit me, bonk. And I do wonder if perhaps I should have Bessegues with this suit of armour. Little plates that hang down and protect that area. But in time, I will add mail, because I was not wearing this armour with the patches of mail for the armpit and the inside of the elbow there to come. I was in good company though. Most people in armour that I saw at Tewkesbury didn't seem to have mail on the inside of their elbows or armpits. So clearly it's not considered absolutely essential for reenactment purposes. But it's something I want to do. I want to get this armour complete and as authentic as I can get it. So I've got all the equipment and mail. I will in time do that, and then I'll have to work out a way of attaching it, probably with more points, more laces, to the doublet, so that I can remove it for washing the doublet, which will definitely be necessary. So the other bruise was here, and that I definitely did notice. Over and over again, ow! I would feel, this was particularly on the second day, I would feel a very definite pinch there, and I would look and I'd say, well, what's catching me? And there was nothing anywhere near. Everything looked fine, and so I would do that, and then, ow! What? Ow! Because it really, I mean, seriously. So presumably the action of doing that movement must have cleared whatever it was that was causing the pinch, but something was really pinching. Some part of the cutter and the van brace, I think, or the rear brace more likely, was, yes, of course, the rear brace, was pinching me here. That it happened a lot on the second day and not much on the first suggests strongly that it was a lacing problem. I laced things up slightly differently the second day in conjunction with my squire, and so possibly that can be cured with maybe punching holes in slightly different position on these tabs, using a different lacing configuration. Maybe that could be sorted. But if not, then I'm presumably going to have to get a grinder, and I'm going to have to take off a corner of something somewhere, because it really did hurt quite a lot. But it didn't disable me in any way. I was able to carry on fighting. Now then, I suppose I should tell you about the helmet. Now, the helmet, I don't have to show you, because at the end of the Tewkesbury, I gave it to a company that's going to be putting in, I hope, a really excellent helmet liner, and they've still got it. Now, the helmet, in terms of vision, when the visor was down, I could see forwards against the people I was fighting immediately in front of me, actually all right, and down, thanks to the uncommonly generous number of breaths in the visor, I could see down reasonably well. But as I say, the ground was not littered with the hazards that perhaps a real battlefield would be littered with, and so the need to be careful about where I was putting my feet wasn't as great as perhaps reality would have required. But anyway, yes, with the visor down, I could see well enough. The helmet definitely makes you quite a bit deafer, and when I've got a thick helmet liner in there, I may be even deafer still, but I was able to hear, I think, sort of enough of what was going on, and I could definitely see forwards enough of what was going on. Upwards, you know, couldn't really see upwards, but maybe you don't need to be able to see upwards. The problem I encountered with the helmet was the visor. You could open the visor, let go, and it would just go shunk straight again. So you'd have to open it with quite a bit of force and hold it up there like that, and then it would stay up, which is fine. It was designed to be that way, but it takes both hands. So if you've got a spear and you need to put your visor up, you need to stop, put the spear, lean the spear against you, and then brace the helmet with one hand, and then with the other hand unclip the visor, which isn't easy when you've got gauntlets on, but eventually you find the thing. Yep, you unclip it, and then you have to put a bit of welly in with both hands. One hand just won't work. Similarly, if I tried to close it with one hand, it would just tip my helmet forward. You have to brace it against the back of the head with one hand and then close it. And then with the one hand on the back, one hand on the front, you have to push really quite hard to get it to lock shut. So if you're running along and you see someone in danger and you want to just open your visor, look out behind you, and close your visor again, sorry, with my helmet, not an option. You have to come to a halt, find something to do with your spear, lean it against you, and then open it with both hands. So the fact that you need both hands was really quite a major inconvenience, one that I hadn't predicted. Holding the spear, you could say, well, just drop the spear on the ground. I noticed again and again, people wearing armour didn't do things like drop things on the ground. They didn't use the ground as a third hand when getting on with something. If they had something in their hand, they would throw it over their shoulder, they would give it to someone else, they would do almost anything and put it on the ground. Because when you're wearing armour like this, the ground is an awfully long way away. And when people did go to pick things up off the ground, normally what they would do is they would keep their bodies and heads fairly upright, and they would kneel down and then pick the thing up and then stand up again, which takes a moderate amount of effort and strength. So they didn't want to be doing that all the time. Yes, the ground is a long way away, and I was talking with Matt Easton, and we agreed that if you're an adventurer in a Dungeons and Dragons-y type world, then you would not wear this kind of armour. It's as soon as you have to climb, crawl, pick something off the ground, really do anything much, it's so flipping awkward that you would pretty quickly conclude, now that I'm going to be wearing something, I'll just wear mail, I'll wear something else, brigandine, I don't know, just not this. Many years ago, I made a video about whether wearing armour was a skill, and to summarise, I said, nah, not much really. Once you know how it goes on, you stick it on and then off you go. If it's properly designed, it'll stay on you, so everything's fine. And yes, you could say the same of this sort of armour. Once you know how it goes on, you put it on, but there is one hell of a lot more to knowing how it goes on. It's enormously more complicated and time consuming to put on this sort of armour than other sorts of ancient armour. And there are so many more things that can go wrong, so many more adjustments that you can make, that there is perhaps some skill to just getting it on in the first place. It's a skill you could acquire fairly quickly, but it would be quite specific to your armour. You'd have to try armour a few times to really get good at putting it on and wearing it. Also, if your opponent is wearing this kind of armour, you have to fight differently, because just hitting him with a sword isn't going to do him any harm at all. So you go to half sword and you get in there and you go for chinks in the armour, you go for his armpit, or you wrestle him to the ground and then find some vulnerable spot. You end up fighting differently when wearing this sort of armour, particularly against someone wearing this sort of armour. And so that is a skill. It's not exactly wearing armour, but fighting against someone in this sort of armour is specific to this sort of armour. So it's a bit of skill to it. But even so, with role-playing games, I wouldn't bother with it as a separate skill. Anyway, so I've talked to you about the helm. Gauntlets. That's right. I haven't talked to you about gauntlets. So I sewed these on the train on the way down as well. So I sewed the fingertips into the tips of the leather on the gauntlet itself. So there you go. You can put them on yourself, not brilliantly quickly, but that didn't take me very long. And the fingertips, as you move, they bring the articulated fingers round, but not brilliantly well. Now, I don't know about you, but with this joint on my fingers, it actually doesn't go just to the right angle. It goes significantly past a right angle, maybe even 30, 40 degrees past a right angle as I do that, you see? Whereas these fingers, if I bend them, that joint there, the equivalent of that joint there, doesn't go anything like that sort of angle. It doesn't get anywhere near 90 degrees. It's 60 degrees, even that's being generous. It doesn't even get to 60 degrees. So the amount of bend in that finger isn't anything like what you would get in a leather glove or an ungloved hand. So you leave, can you see, part of the gauntlet behind, and this puts an awful lot of strain on those fingertips as you're gripping.
But I believe that's possibly a touch.
Now, in time, I will do more to secure the glove to the metal parts of the gauntlet, but I didn't want to sew all the way down the finger, because then when I were to grip like this, you can imagine, it might just end up ripping the glove. I've been told that one thing you can do is sew a little bit to that joint, a little bit that joint with gaps in between, but I think actually it's better if I attach more of these straps. So I will start by putting one in the middle of the finger there. I think that's probably stronger. Also, there's quite a big hole here. The side of my index finger is almost completely exposed, and that bit of my hand there, that's not just the fleshy little bit of webbing between thumb and palm. No, that's a substantial bit of my hand. As I'm pushing there, I'm pushing against bone. So it did strike me that there's a dangerous amount of exposed body there, and in a particularly exposed position, because if that's the lead hand on a spear, say, and you've got a blade coming down the shaft, that's where it's going to hit. It's being guided into that bit of largely exposed me. A leather glove isn't going to protect me an awful lot. Otherwise, I was able to grip my spear fine. And there was, however, one other thing that went wrong. Now, I'd had these gauntlets for quite some while before I even noticed that the backs of them open up. You see, that bit opens up. There's a pin there which goes into a hole there, and it clips in like that. The thing is, though, that I kept finding that my the back end, the gauntlet, this bit of the gauntlet was flapping around all over the shop, because again and again I would get hit there, and it would then just spring open like that. I'm not sure that happened from where. It may have happened once or twice from opposing weapons, but more often I think it was just people jostling me in the line. We were fighting quite close, in close formations, shoulder to shoulder. So the person next to me just had to bash into me a bit, and that's the bit of me that is going to hit every single time, and it would do that. It would open over and over and again. And while I was actually mid-fight, this happened, I think, about 5-6 times, something like that, and so that was just a menace. So something really has to be done about that. I spoke to my armour about it, and he suggested putting on a strap, but I think that a strap would be ugly and frankly unnecessary, because I don't need these gauntlets to open there at all. I can quite easily just fit my hand straight through that. Indeed, I can, the hand whilst wearing the vambraces, it just happily goes through. So why do I ever need to open this bit? So my feeling on the matter is to keep it looking beautiful and just rivet it over, just rivet that shut, make it solid, and then that problem will just disappear. But at the moment, no, you see, I can't have that.
And Edward's just boxed the prince, and the prince has thumped him on his midriff. This is not chivalric behaviour.
Next up is this thing. How did this perform on the battlefield? Well, it occurs to me that before I tell you all about this, first, I really ought to get up and go out of shot this way and into this shot, wearing one tiny continuity error. Did you spot it? Well done if you did. Now, are you really interested in the War of the Roses? I mean, you are watching this video, so I suspect you must be at least a little bit interested. But are you really? Can you prove it? Would you like to know more? Well, there are loads of audiobooks out there that you could be listening to. For example, there's this one, Lancaster and York, which is a history of the Wars of the Roses. But it's 22 hours long. Perhaps that's what you want. More the merrier, you might think. I want to know all the detail. Give me depth. On the other hand, you might be living a busy executive lifestyle. You don't have time for that sort of thing, and so you need something shorter. Well, how about The Hollow Crown? That clocks in at only 13.5 hours. A substantial saving, but maybe that's still not good enough for you. You need the information, you need it now, because you're a man of today. I respect that. Well, possibly you could go for a brief history of the War of the Roses, and that won't save you any time, because that is also 13.5 hours long. I suspect that when they were thinking up the title for that one, they had some other rival publication in mind than The Hollow Crown. But anyway, how about My Kingdom for a Horse? That's pretty quick. That's 6.5 hours. Right. So you're so busy that even that's too much for you, eh? Wow. Okay, have you got one of these hats? I think possibly you should be wearing one of these hats, because... all right. Okay. But how about this history? That's 3 and a bit hours. Or how about the Wars of the Wars of the Roses? History from beginning to end. Bingo! It's 1 hour. Okay. So maybe that's too short. Now you think I'm just being silly. Okay, well, pick one of the longer ones. The point I'm making is that there are loads of audiobooks out there of all sorts of different degrees of depth to suit whatever amount of depth you want. But maybe you think, actually, maybe a history book is a little bit dry. Maybe I want it dramatised, like this, using the words of Shakespeare. Or maybe you learn history better from fiction. It goes in better, you can appreciate it better, or you just know that you'll get through it to the end, because sometimes history can be a little bit dry, can't it? So a bit of fiction, like this, or this, and they've got loads of audio books that are set during the Wars of the Roses. Who are they? Well, I'm about to get to that. Or maybe you want to focus on a particular battle or a particular character. Yep, there are audiobooks for those as well. Or maybe you're one of those people who, rather than typing like this, which is the way I do it, you do it like this with your thumbs, because you're a youth of today, and maybe the podcast is your thing. Well, how about this? A series of 68 podcasts on, yes, the Wars of the Roses. So, yes, you could get yourself to audible.com/Lindybeige. And what's Audible? Well, it's a huge website with just gazillions, I know that's not a proper number, of audiobooks, and not just audiobooks, but also audio material of lots of sorts, including podcasts, which I've just mentioned, and including originals, which you get access to. Normally, you would get a month's membership, and then you'd have access to any number of the originals that you like, and one audiobook per month, which you get to keep forever, by the way. But if you go to audible.com/Lindybeige, you will find details of a free trial period during which you can get one free Audible book and audiobook, and you get to wander around the site and listen to all sorts of things for free, including some of the things I've mentioned already. So there you go. Does that sound like a good deal? Good, because it is.
And so there's this curious sort of balance once you're in there, the scrum, between being careful not actually to land any injury on the people you're fighting, and yet at the same time not allowing them to beat you too easily. There's a matter of pride involved here.
So how did I fare in the actual, fighting bit? Well, we mustered in blisteringly hot sun, at least by British standards. I was told that it was 28 degrees centigrade. in the shade, but there was no shade on Tewkesbury battlefield. By the way, when they reenact Tewkesbury, it's actually on the actual field of the actual battle, which is quite nice. It's rare that things are reenacted where they actually happened. Anyway, so there was no shade, so what the temperature was in the sun couldn't tell you, but an awful lot more. Some people in the audience later said to me, no, that wasn't 28 degrees, that must have been well into the 30s, because it really, by British standards, was a very unusually hot day, and the organisers were quite wise to the dangers of this, with lots of people wandering around in armour, about 2,000 reenactors there were, and so there were lots of people in period kit carrying reasonably in period jugs and buckets and the like of water to make sure that everyone got to drink. We were drinking as we queued up, waiting to go onto the field, and during the battle itself I must have taken drinks, at least 3, 4, 5 times, something like that. So we're all well hydrated, and as far as I know, all fine, although I did hear later about some people dropping out of the battle because they found it just so hot. But they could have been dropping out because maybe their kit was very heavy and they weren't perhaps in the greatest of physical condition. I don't know. I don't think it was just because of the heat. But anyway, I didn't suffer. I was taking enough drinks, and so I didn't actually really suffer from the heat all that much. Yes, I sweated a bit, but I was expecting that from the exertion. So the heat actually, in context, didn't turn out to be much of a problem, but I could see how it could be, particularly if you didn't have access to water. So water carriers in battle would be quite important people. We formed up, and I was in the Yorkist line. I was in fact one of the personal bodyguard of the Duke of Gloucester, later to become, though of course we didn't know that at the time, Richard III. But he was being played by a chap in very splendid livery, but no hunchback. He didn't go the whole way. But never mind, you wouldn't have seen that under the armour perhaps anyway. He was our unit commander. We had a standard bearer, and we had a few guys. I had a spear, and we fought in the front line quite a bit, particularly on the first day, and the line wasn't very deep. In the main it was only about 2 ranks deep. But I put myself at the front, why not face the danger, and I went forward with my spear, and I came up against a load of billmen of the Lancastrians coming the other way. What's a billman? Well, he's someone who's got one of these. This is a bill hook. Obviously the weapon version of it is on the end of a big long wooden staff, but this is the essence of it. So you've got a bill hook there, which is an agricultural implement for pruning hedges and trees and so forth, and you've got a spiky bit, and you've got a spiky bit. You've also got at this angle here, you see that, which is quite significant, or at least I found it to be quite significant right at the very start of the fight, because my opponent immediately went boom like that, catching my spear in that little fork and pushing it very firmly indeed down against the ground. And I wasn't expecting him to do that, not because it's not an effective technique or not something that would have happened in real life, but I just thought we weren't going to be very competitive. I was told it was just going to be a bit of amiable bopping, and this guy did that to me straight away, and I thought, oh, I see, so you want to play that sort of game, do you? Now he was looking around him, hoping that his fellows would, on seeing me with my spear temporarily immobilised, they would then attack me, but actually they weren't quite on the ball, and no one did, and I was able to extricate my spear. And I never allowed that to happen again, because wise to it, I thought, oh well, I'd better not allow anyone to do that. But that meant constant circling round, and flipping my spear up and resisting downward pressure quite a bit, which was constantly threatening to bring the tip of my spear up, and we were not supposed to bring the tip of the spear up. We were told that all attacks had to be at waist height. A lot of people were wearing no face protection. A lot of the ordinary foot soldiers had kettle hats and completely exposed faces, so you've got to make sure that you don't spear someone in the face. That would be terrible. So if when they were hitting down, because another thing they would do, they would hit my spear down. So one would hit it down, and then I would then have to bring it back up, and someone else would then hit it down. But of course, in order to avoid being hit, I would have to make sudden movements sideways, whoop, and up, and get it out of the way. And so that's constantly threatening to bring the top of my spear up. But I was keeping my spear, I think, reasonably under control, and so I didn't hurt anyone. But there were a couple of hairy moments, one of which was after an attack to my left in which an axeman had piled into our ranks from the Lancastrian side, having a go. I heard "Marshal coming through! Marshal coming through!" said with quite a lot of vigour and even some aggression, and he was pushing his way through the line opposite me, and I thought, oh dear, what's happened here? And then he came and addressed quite definitely me. There was no mistaking it. He was quite definitely talking to me. And he said, no, you don't hold the spear like that. You hold the spear over the top like that and keep your point down at all times. And, well, there and then was definitely not the time to argue with the marshal. So I said, right, okay, right. And I held it as he instructed, and he said, okay, that's all right, you can carry on now, and he left. Now, holding the spear like that is really weak and awkward, and if you thrust like that, because it tends to make you thrust like that, then the spear naturally comes up, as opposed to that where it goes more horizontally. And here you're in much more control of your weapon than here. Also, because they were constantly trying to whack downwards the top of my spear, it's very easy for one of them to knock it out of my grip if my hand's that way, but they're never going to knock it out of my grip if my hand's that way. So I've got much more control over my spear that way. So I didn't really get on with fighting that way at all. So after just fighting obediently with it that way for a bit, I just withdrew from the line and let other people have a bit of a fight. And two people came up to me separately, said, don't worry about that, don't worry about that, you're fine. Almost everyone fights with it like that. There's nothing in the rules saying that you have to grip it like that. He was just saying something to get you to keep the top tip of your spear down, which I thought was odd, because every single one of my hits that I dished out had quite definitely been at the regulation waist height. I was really confident of that. And someone else said to me, I think I know what happened. He was the guy fighting to my left. When the axeman had charged him and the axeman had swung at his shoulder like this, he had done what any martially competent man would do when armed with a spear, and he did that and just parried. But of course that brings the tip of your spear up. But he's coming back and raising the spear in the same movement, so he's not thrusting into anyone's face. His spear went nowhere near anyone's face, and I, being to his right, thought, oh, I must support my fellow here, so I pulled back as well, and I raised my spear so that I was ready to parry and help out with that, and perhaps pull the point of my spear back far enough to actually be able to get it into a position to attack the attacker. So as I was doing that, there was, I suppose, a moment when my spear did come up high, and that could have been what the marshal had seen from behind the Lancastrian line and had spurred him to come through. But I'm confident that my spearhead at that point went nowhere near anyone's face. However, later on, my spear did get a little bit closer to someone's face than perhaps it should have been. You see, I was one of the Duke of Gloucester's bodyguards, and the script said that at the end of the fight, the Duke of Gloucester would go into a one-on-one fight with the leader of the enemy and win. Hurrah! You see, meant to be a big dramatic moment. How could we make it more dramatic? Well, what we could do is we get one of his bodyguards, Muggins, to go forward and take on that leader of the enemy and lose, die, thud, thus establishing this as a worthy and formidable opponent, so that when our hero then went forwards and won, bigger cheer from the audience, hooray, Richard of York and all the rest of it. At this point, not giving battle in vain, because that's the Battle of Bosworth. That won't happen until 1485. Now, I didn't actually know who this guy I was supposed to fight was, but I was led to believe that towards the end of the battle, you go forward and you fight the guy and die. Oh, okay. And that moment was coming, and I was given orders, right, go out there and fight that guy. And I looked ahead of me and I thought, well, which one is it? I said, right, do you mean that guy? And I described him, and he replied, yes. Now, of course, I was wearing a helmet, and so possibly my words weren't very clear. And he just thought, well, surely it's obvious. And he was pointing in the direction, so maybe he thought that I knew, but I didn't. And I walked forward, seeing this guy to fight. And I thought, okay, he's my opponent. And and the guy just turned around and walked away. So I thought, what do I do? Do I just poke him in the back when he's not looking? I don't think it can't be him. He's clearly not expecting to fight a duel with me. But who else could it be? Because it can't be that guy, the guy in the fancy livery, because he's not wearing a helmet. Now, I wasn't brilliantly familiar with the fighting rules and so forth, but one thing I definitely knew was that you were not allowed to fight anyone who was not wearing a helmet. And this guy was not wearing any head protection at all, so it definitely wasn't him. So who was it? Well, my commander's, "Kill him!" he bellowed at me, pointing quite definitely at the guy with no helmet. So I thought, really? And as I hesitated, the guy with the helmet, realising, oh, that's the guy I'm supposed to fight, went for me. And whoa! And just naturally, someone's going with you with a sword. Anyway, for one, just fraction of it, my spear did come up to head height. But I knew not to thrust into his face, so I didn't do that. And I let him get up to me and kill me full crunch. And the second day, I knew who it was, and so it was all fine the second day. And I went up to him afterwards and said, "Oh, sorry about that." And there were no hard feelings whatsoever. He said, "Oh, that's fine. These things happen." But even so, it was a little bit of a hairy moment.
My family will rule England above yours.
And the king callously kicks the dying boy.
Before administering the coup de grace.
And cuts.
Now then, I was talking there about not recognising people. My father was in the audience for this battle. There were thousands and thousands of people that had crowded in to watch the battle. And after a bit, I saw him, and he was smack in the middle. So I thought, oh, great, he's bound to see me, because I was at the very near end of the line. And I'm quite tall and wearing a very high-profile suit of armour that he has seen pictures of, so he must know what it looks like. And I was going to be right in front of him. And he never saw me. In fact, most of the time he was looking through binoculars at the far end of the Lancastrian line, thinking for some reason that I was there. Anyway, I was right in front of it. At one point, I turned to my left and just gave him a little wave. It's not, it's not it breaks the immersion possibly very slightly, but I'm sure that people occasionally wave to each other on battlefields, so that's not necessarily unrealistic. But anyway, so there you go. That's how difficult it can be to recognise people on the battlefield. My own father, despite the fact that I was standing right in front of him for most of an hour, didn't recognise me. So there you go. Heraldry is a useful thing.
It's very static on the Duke of Somerset's line there. It's not a great deal going on.
Years ago, I can remember I was doing some early medieval reenactment. We were fighting with one-handed spear and shield, except for someone on the other side decided that what she would do is have a dagger in one hand and nothing in the other. And then she would wait for us to thrust, grab the spear, and then make her way up the spear and go stabby stab. I didn't particularly like this, because what we were doing to keep each other safe was just prodding gently with spears. Now, of course, if I know that she's going to try to grab my spear, what I will do is I will hold my spear back further out of her reach, and then I will BAM! Slam it in really fast, because then she won't be able to catch it. But of course, that's not safe. So what she was doing only worked, or at least only worked well, because of the very safe proddy way that we were fighting. So this is one of the many compromises. When I went in reenactment, when I went to Tewkesbury, I had never fought in exactly the way that the people there were fighting. And indeed, that could be said of an awful lot of the other people there, because there were 2,000 people there from loads of different reenactment societies, all of which have got their own rules and their own ideas about what is safe or what is realistic. And some of these ideas are flatly contradictory to each other. So it is a bit of a problem. Anyway, I did my best, and in the main, everything was fine.
They're a good, steady pace. They're going to do a good job of work here, because that's what they do. Somerset tried to lead away.
So that's how I got on at the Battle of Tewkesbury. As for the fighting, there was no serious competitive fighting, so there's not much to say about that. I got a bruise, whoop-de-doo. Oh, someone else, he went forward to fight in an earlier part of the battle and got whacked on his gauntlet, and it broke the finger, the armour of the gauntlet, and then he got whacked again in exactly the same place, so it hit his finger. Down he went as dead. I ran forward from the line to help my comrade, got to him and realised that, oh, he's in a worse way than I realised. And so he did actually need a bit of help. And we got him behind our lines, and he went, he just flopped onto the ground with a bit of a grimace on his face. And later he was saying that it was an adrenaline thing. That he'd been whacked, taken an injury, and he was out for a bit. Not completely unconscious, but he was definitely out of things for a bit. And I've never had that. Maybe I'm just very calm when I'm fighting because I don't get scared or worked up much, or maybe I just have never been hit that hard. I don't know.
The barnet where it was foggy, and one of the sides mistook the sun in splendour for the oriflamme.
Now, one thing that is a bit of a disappointment is that this armour doesn't have the fabulous mirror finish that it had when it was brand and spanking. It's covered in little scratches. So where the upper arms, for instance, rub against the side of the back and breast, or where the pauldrons scratch the front of the breastplate here, I knew that these scratches were going to arrive, and so I wasn't particularly surprised or disappointed. It's just something that one has to live with. But the general area of it's still not as mirror finish. It's been oiled in places. It's gone a little bit rusty. Then I've cleaned the rust off, but it's never quite as smooth. I'm just going to have to get used to the fact that it won't be the way it looked when it just came out of the workshop. One thing I do remember feeling on the field of Tewkesbury was rather vulnerable. You might think that's rather strange, because surely in a suit of armour like this you feel invulnerable, don't you? Well, no, I was quite conscious that I was still vulnerable to thousands of natural shocks that had already been invented by that time. If you get belted on the side of the head really hard with a pole arm wielded by someone strong and quite angry, then it'll just knock you senseless whether you've got a helmet on or not. And there are always chinks in the armour that people can find if they look hard enough. So, yeah, I felt fairly tough, to be sure, but not invulnerable. And I did feel a different sort of vulnerability, and I felt it quite keenly. And that is, I was very slow. So I felt that it's really important that my side wins this, because if my side loses, if the men around me waver and then rout, and I have to rout with them because otherwise I'm taking on the entire enemy army on my own, I'm not going to be at the front end of that rout, nimbly skipping away from the enemy. Oh, no, I'm going to be one of the slow guys at the back. I will be captured, possibly killed, maybe ransomed, if my armour's rich enough or my family's wealthy enough, but yes, I wouldn't be scarpering. If I could get to a horse, then maybe. But I was amongst footmen, and yeah, I felt very vulnerable because I was so slow. If things went pear-shaped, I would have been in big trouble.
And here the young Prince of Wales is leading forward his men to hit King Edward's centre while it's static.
That was brutal.
Yes, that was also very brave. And the Lancastrian centre moving up to engage the Yorkists.
Now, after all this talk of all the various issues I've had with the various bits of the armour, you may be thinking that I'm disappointed with the way the armour worked. But actually, no, I'm quite pleased with the way it worked. And there were lots of people at Tewkesbury who've been wearing armour for years, who knew that I was wearing mine for the first time, and who said that actually, for a first time out, this armour was working pretty well. It takes quite a while with this style of armour to iron out all the kinks. So, no, really, no, it was fine.
Austrians are determined to keep the initiative, but they're still keeping a rear guard.
Now then, I want to do some more of this, but I've been Googling and I haven't so far found another battle to test this armour at, but there will be another one day, and possibly I'll have a proper cameraman and we can see a little bit more of it.
Lindybeige!